overstepping a little bit, but maybe even reach out to the National Center of Sports Safety or some of their physical therapists or athletic trainers, because they have pre and post tests you can take, again, outside of the medical evaluation side of it, but just questionnaires that you can give your athletes before or maybe during the middle of the season, wherever the high point is, that you start seeing them stressed. And maybe they can help you with some resources, or your local university, they can help you with resources if you can test them.
Catch me afterward. That's my area.
Well, and I was just adding on to that, don't let recovery be once we've hit that end point of where a student athlete is dropping off or completely exhausted, because what we see is the typical, whether it's youth, when we're dealing with younger players, to collegiate, there are so many more stressors that are happening that aren't just what's happening on the field, what's happening on the course, what's happening when we're running. So there's so many other things that are added into that you constantly have to think about as a young athlete. And so having having the opportunity to have breaks and do recovery throughout the season is extremely important. Not just when we get to, okay, we've just gotten over that hump and we had a really tough 3 weeks and you see them dog tired and exhausted. I mean, it's that physical, having the opportunity to recover throughout. And then it's also the mental. I mean, sometimes if we're dealing with, the overtraining, maybe we're doing one task for entirely too long. And that's causing that physical overtraining, that too, and causing the mental distractions as well. But having recovery isn't just once a problem happens. I mean, let's be preventative instead of reactive when it comes to that sort of thing.
Thanks, Megan. I want to just kind of get to this last subject. I knew we could talk about this until 10 o'clock if we wanted to. But I know that my wife as Carrie back there, is a registered dietitian, so we talk about this a lot in our house when it comes to the foods that we're eating, and it's really simple. It is fat, protein, and carbohydrate, and getting proper percentages of those things, whether you are increasing your activity, certain percentages of those three aspects that you may need, one or the other. So I think, just kind of personally from what I've heard from her and from several of the individuals on the panel, how important those three things are in nutrition. I don't know who really wants to start. Rachel, you might want, because you're currently teaching sports nutrition at UAB, and then Elizabeth, I want to get into something that you and I talked about as well.
So I'm going back to, I guess, advertising and media and all of these things that we have access to, but really we don't have that much control over, especially with kids, everything that they're taking in. There's a lot of stuff out there on, you could tie in the diet stuff, body weight, all of these different angles, but we see all of these things with nutrition on low-carb diets, low-fat, or eliminating some different macronutrient. And really, the take-home message just for sports nutrition, athletes, all people in general, for me, my personal belief is it's really just having a balance of all three of those groups. We have this idea that fat's bad, fat is bad, no, do not eliminate fat. Carbohydrates are bad, no, that's our #1 fuel source. So,
but what if I want to eat like a caveman? Even though I drive a car and I cook on an open, on a stove. And I drive to my workout of the day.
So, I still think that it's really just, it's going to be so different per individual, but if you're talking about it from an athletic standpoint, I just think a balance between those three groups, including all three groups in everything that you're eating, is going to be, really important. And Brandon may have more on this in terms of different athletic populations or the percentages, but that really is going to vary so much, as with most, soccer, basketball, sports like that, the higher intensity of the exercise, the more carbohydrate you're going to be using. So really for all athletes and, just anyone, exercise in general, carbs are going to be what you're going to need most immediately. And that's going to include your sugars, and your brain also is going to be functioning with those sugars. So that's going to be really important. But also, if you talk about the opposite end of the spectrum with endurance athletes. A lot of us are distance runners in here, you know. Fat is also very important, but so are the carbs. You have to get it all in there, and then you have to get your protein, because that's going to really sustain your lean mass, and you need that for the demand that you're putting on your body. So I just think all three are extremely important, and we can't really forget about one of the macronutrients. They all go together, they all work together, and we can't feel our best, we can't perform our best, we can't focus, we can't really optimally function without having all three.
When we're talking about those three things, I don't know, Brandy may want to take this, Amy, I'm not sure. When we're talking about fat, protein, and carb, I know there are a lot of young soccer players here, and then a lot of distance runners. So both of those to me are endurance sports. I mean, soccer, you're playing, 90 minutes straight, 60 minutes straight, running. A lot of us do that, or longer. When we're talking about those three nutrients, what kind of percentages are we looking at? I mean, we're saying eat fat, protein, and carb, but there's some percentages that you probably want to stay maybe within. What are some of those percentages that we can kind of take away? Or does it depend?
It's not the cool answer, but usually you can, so technically, you can do 50 to 60% carbohydrates for, say, an endurance athlete or a soccer runner. 25% roughly of protein, and then maybe another 25 or 30% fat, but depending on what is that. So what do the percentages mean? And I don't know, y'all, probably the easiest for me is just close your fist. Especially if we're talking about a teen athlete or something like that, and then if we're talking carbohydrates, rice, potatoes, something like that, they'll have 1 or 2 this size servings. Protein for again a younger athlete or even an adult, just to keep it simple, is it'll be the size of the inside of your palm, no fingers, and then the width right here. And then generally with fat, I just say let's look at our sources list of what I call fueling fats. Let's try to get some of the nuts, the seeds, the avocado, salmon, some of those types of things, to try to work those in. Don't worry necessarily about the serving size, for this setting. But for me, if I'm just generalities, if we're going to choose carbohydrates or grains, always a simple way to do it is make sure it's from the earth. That's the best way to do it. Okay, stuff that's going to be grown in the ground or from the ground. Eat a rainbow. Look at your plate. Make sure you've got a few different colors on there. When it comes to my protein,
You're not talking about Lucky Charms and tricks.
that doesn't count. If you're talking with a high school athlete, you have to specify.
That's why I said that.
Because if I tell them to drink fluids or hydrate or whatever, then they're going to Gatorade, Kool-Aid, Minute Maid, whatever it may be. They are not going to water. They are going to Lucky Charms or Skittles. You said eat a rainbow. So they win, I lose. Less legs the better when you drink your protein. It's a simple way to look at it. So obviously, cow or something like that's got 4 legs, then the chicken has 2, fish has none. So that's another little simple way to kind of look at it, right? You want to talk about it. But those are just some little simple things that you can look at on your plate.
Before we get to any lasting questions, I actually meant to start with this, Elizabeth, so I'm sorry, but when we're talking about just in general, just forming some healthy habits, a lot of that starts with the age that some of the kids are here, even before. But we can always change those habits as we're getting older. When I was talking to Elizabeth, I asked her how you got into cooking, why you wanted to write about food, and how you became a chef. And she said that her memories of food were so happy growing up because she would cook with her grandmother and had these, these memories of being in her kitchen and smelling everything. And I was saying, I did the same thing, but a lot of times it was chicken fried steak or, refried beans and tamales and stuff like that if I was visiting my grandmother in West Texas. But the point is that food experience with, whether it's a grandmother or a parent, a lot of you guys here are parents that have influence over your kids, because cooking with them and beginning really good, happy memories of food and good relationships with food, I think is great. So I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit, Elizabeth, and then some of the things I know you've written about of what you can do when we talk about some of the healthy foods of, whatever, it could be quinoa, I don't know, it's kind of a bland grain, but what you can do as a chef to make some of those healthy foods that are a little bland, maybe a little better, more appealing.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about healthy food, it's one thing to know what foods are healthy and what you should be eating, but the big piece of the puzzle that I think is often missing is actually enjoying those foods and enjoying eating them. And for me, when I was talking to Joey, was that I was raised basically loving food, and my grandmother wasn't making the healthiest things like fried chicken and banana pudding, but like the act of eating was something that was always exciting to me, and I think it's really important to instill that in your kids, and regardless of whatever food or tradition you have. But so I think that if you can make that a healthy habit and teach them to associate positive emotions with healthy eating, it can help them form lifelong habits. And yeah, I mean, there's tons of things you can do with your kids to get them to eat more healthy foods. Like I was telling Joey, if you can think of a food that they might love, like mashed potatoes or mac and cheese or whatever, and there's comfort foods like that. There are tons of ways to kind of think outside the box and think about how to make those foods healthier, whether it's maybe working some veggie, you can do cauliflower mashed potatoes, even though it doesn't sound like great in theory, but
You can't even tell we did that at Thanksgiving.
yeah,
I'm sure nobody can tell.
but the fact that you're calling them mashed potatoes, I think will get them excited about that. Or there's a recipe I remember I was cooking that it's it was basically a mac and cheese, but it was healthy, and instead of having that unhealthy cheesy sauce, we figured out a way to make it with chickpeas and onions and carrots, and we basically just did this delicious veggie puree that was super nutty and delicious. So just thinking outside the box and not being afraid to maybe do a little research and try something new, and trying to recreate those comfort flavors that all of us love as kids and even now. So
I wish we could make fried chicken healthy, because that's my kind of go-to. Any questions out there? We have a little bit of time. Sure, Jim.
Any thoughts on enriched bleach, white flour versus whole sweet flour in your carbs?
So if you can, I guess white bread versus whole grain bread, or bagels, pastas, if you can get the whole grain option, that's always going to be better, because you're going to be getting more fiber out of that. And a lot of us, typical American diet, a lot of us, we're not getting enough fiber. So that's going to be the big kicker with that, because in these enriched bleached flours, basically the grain, it's been stripped, and then the nutrients or the vitamins and minerals have been added back in, but that fiber has been stripped away. So I know that can be difficult with kids or picky eaters, because Wonder Bread is so soft and delicious, but that's why it's so soft and delicious, because the fiber's been stripped away. So I think if you can get pastas like that or breads, it's always going to be the better option. But it can be difficult, because some, picky eaters, it's hard. But in terms of actual taste, you can find different options that really, they're not going to taste all that different, or you can kind of, especially in pastas, I feel like that's easier to hide with sauce and all of that. But breads, that's a little difficult, but it's always going to be a better choice for sure.
Elizabeth, did you want to add?
Yeah.
I think.
I was just curious what your thoughts were on supplementation with the nerve package. Is it necessary, or can you just get everything? There's
What
so
type
much-
of supplements?
Just, anything from just a fish oil pill to, you read so much about what you should take, what you shouldn't take. There's so much marketed to us as athletes and just in general.
Yeah, that's definitely a difficult question, because I always kind of use supplements like multivitamins, and I take multivitamins and iron pills, and I've struggled with iron deficiency in the past, so that's something that's really important to me, to always supplement my multivitamin. I look at it as kind of like insurance. I know a lot of dietitians and people I've come across just in my years as an athlete and in nutrition that, they're like, oh, you don't need it if you get it from the diet. Well, it depends on what we're eating, and our diets are very different. And so I think, depending on the individual, of course, but as a female endurance athlete, I think first it's important to, iron's a biggie but I think you should kind of know where you stand. So I think getting that checked, not just taking things because, you're not sure, but I kind of view it as a little bit of insurance, just in case, but it's good to be in tune with that as well. In terms of all of the extra supplements, I wouldn't say it's certainly not improving performance in terms of endurance athletes. And a lot of those things, if you're iron deficient and you start supplementing iron, your performance is going to dramatically improve, but that's because you had a deficiency. Same thing with B vitamins or other vitamins and minerals, but if you have an adequate amount in your body and you're not deficient and you take these things, a lot of it you're just going to get rid of, and it's not improving performance because you're where you should be at your optimal level. So in terms of improving endurance capacity, that's definitely not going to be the case. So, any other questions?
Yeah, I just really wanted to piggyback off and confirm that. So especially when it comes to, even though we may not think of them as medically related supplementation, iron, vitamin D, some of those things, I always stress, go see your doctor first. I'm talking blindly. So go see the doc, get the labs, let's see what it looks like. Because also you could end up with iron toxicity if you over supplement, and that's going to lead to some issues as well. But I mean, other supplements, every athlete is different. It depends on what supplements. Fish oil, multivitamins, same thing. I always call them a great safety net. It's not going to hurt to take a fish oil, especially if you self-analyze your diet. I don't get, any sources of them. You can Google sources of omega-3s. And if you're not getting any of that stuff in your diet, then yes, a good supplement. Fish oil would be great, 2,000 milligrams. Maybe one in the morning, one in the evening. Vitamin D, depends on what your levels are, would be great. But other supplements, as far as like a Gatorade or a Chew or something like that, endurance athletes are all different. Their tastes are different. Some of them are just so tired of the sweet stuff, they prefer taking a Coke and shaking it up to make it flat. I mean, you still get the carbs, you get the sugars, you get the electrolytes. Do it. Some of them eat regular potatoes as they run, so it's just different for everybody.
What about substitutional supplements like protein powders? Is that, I don't.
Whey protein.
Yeah, right. It's whey protein. It's amazing. Whey protein is sold as weight loss, weight gain, performance enhancement. It does everything somehow. It's pretty neat when you look at the different marketing for it. But y'all, it's essentially dairy. So I mean, if it's great from a convenience standpoint, is what I always say. I'm definitely a food first advocate, so it's really good from convenience. If you're in a tight bind and you've got that powder in your shaker bottle, you can transport that anywhere, fill it up with water, shake it up, and you're good to go. It's not going to be a cure-all. It's not going to make you just all of a sudden an elite athlete, but it's good just for convenience, post-workout or run or whatever it may be. But if someone prefers the food route or just has ample protein in their diet, it's not necessarily needed. You can get the same thing with a Greek yogurt or cheese sticks or, deli slices, whatever it may be. And whey protein nowadays is so expensive. It's easier to do the food route. But whey protein, it can be good, but then that leads to, this is kind of where Joy was alluding to earlier with the caffeine stuff, but then that leads into supplement arena, which is the wild, wild west. There's this notion that supplements are regulated like pharmaceuticals, and they're not. We all in here could bottle this water up and put a fancy package on it and start selling it as Mega Performance 2000 or whatever we wanted to. So then you want to make sure your supplement is tested, by a third-party source. Even if it is just whey protein, that stuff can be adulterated, it can be spiked, it can have, fluff in it, have half the protein that they say. So that's the thing with supplements, you got to be careful. Just because it's on the label doesn't mean it's in the container. But Informed Choice is a good brand for third-party testing. NSF is a good third-party company for testing. NSF for sport is, you step up from NSF, it's the same company. But those are the ones who are just testing the pro athletes, the Olympic athletes, and stuff like that. So third-party testing companies like that is good to see if that's on the label of the product.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because they'll have the stamp or it'll just say NSF with a little circle, so you can usually find it pretty easily on the label. But I think just the major takeaway with supplements is that they're called supplements for a reason because they're meant to supplement the diet. obviously there are these proteins in these drinks, that are used as replacement for weight loss, but if we're not talking about weight loss here, they're meant to supplement the diet. So if someone needs more protein, and that's a good way to get it in, that's a great option. If not, if they can get it from the diet, even better. But I think just remember.
But don't do it in lieu of.
Right. For some people though, if they are really low on protein and that's just what works for them, some people that works. And like I said earlier, I think with nutrition, it's finding what works for you to be able to get everything, balanced. So, but with supplements, yeah, if you can get it from whole food first, that's great. But those supplements will kind of go along with that as well.
A few more questions.
Actually, I had something to add to that. I think on that same subject, one food that I think people should be really careful with, or athletes in particular, are like energy bars, because they make a lot of claims like full of protein or like added fiber, stuff like that. And I think the most important piece of advice I can give you is to always just check the ingredients, like read the label, be suspicious of any like outrageous claims, because more than likely, like, I would say, like what everyone else is saying, that you should get your nutrition from whole foods first. But just make sure you're reading the ingredients and just being really mindful of what's on there.
I wanted to know, instead of having Gatorade for the electrolytes, is there other foods you
No. Are you talking during the competition?
can? Well, not just after you said drink Gatorade and drink the electrolytes, after the competition, what food can get the same
Oh,
place electrolytes in food? What food is it?
yes, ma'am. I mean, she could, it doesn't necessarily have to be through fluid, but fluids is easier because we're killing two birds with one stone. It could be milk, chocolate milk. Actually has very similar properties to Gatorade, but it even also has the carbohydrates and the proteins, right? So that's usually a win. That's an instant win. Or it
Found
could
a
be,
winner, right?
it could be just having a meal and water. Maybe now, again, cold season, we can do soups and stews because they're going to have some of those things in them. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a product per se to get those electrolytes in. Maybe it's a banana with peanut butter or cheese crackers or something like that and water. Because, as long as we're getting the potassium and the sodium part, we're going to be fine. So it doesn't necessarily have to be Gatorade.
Any more before we wrap up?
And I know some college athletes are up here. Go back when you were 16 years old, didn't know when to go to the next level. In today's world, not only have to do the training where you're, many hours a week, but the homework load is twice as big as what we have. I know come for. Our daughter give her case, give me 3 nights a week, they get home at 7:30, she doing homework sometimes till 11, 12 at night. The sleep schedule is now shrunken. And in trying to get her up, to get breakfast, that's when the anger stage comes out, right? You're talking about. Advice to parents of this circuit right now. How do you manage that, and how do you? I don't know if we're going to sleep. I don't know if we're going to breakfast. So I'm sorry. But I don't know. I guess I really don't know what I'm asking. It's just kind of is there advice to give to that athlete?
I have some advice, like, we live in America and everything's a business. So like club volleyball, club soccer, club sports is a business, it's taking time. Tutors for kids, school, et cetera, they've got to hit their numbers and revenues, and they've got to hit metrics and test scores in schools, so that's their business. So the only thing I would say would be, I would leverage one of these professionals and just know that I'm in your situation. As some of you know, I've got 3 kids, they play. I'm also in their setting as well, where I work hands-on, and just knowing, like, to that point, like the food and the supplement industry is not regulated, to Brandon's point. By 2020, it's going to be a $40 billion business. Club sports is a business. So just finding a resource and leveraging them, and then having that resource to be able to kind of navigate your way through it, because it's very frustrating for sure.
Two things really I would suggest, and not just things for nutrition, prepare for the worst. So if we're looking at this week, expect that she's not going to have time. Expect that we're going to have challenges, that we're going to be stressed out. If you prepare for the worst, okay, we need to pack meals, we need to pack snacks. If we're talking nutrition, we need to make sure that specific days, we know she's got a test on Thursday, Wednesday's going to be a long night. Let's prepare for that. Let's make sure that on the front end of the week that we're getting more things we need to done, whether that's studying for other things that they have in class, whether that's in how they're eating. I mean, if you prepare for the worst, then you're better prepared for if that situation might happen. And then the other thing that I have, not just nutrition related, but find a way to, because student athletes nowadays are spread so thin, because of school, because of what they're doing in athletics, because if you're not training with someone or seeing someone on the side, you're not doing it right. Make sure that they have time for themselves. I mean, we have our athletes, we call it Steel 30. So whether it's 3 10-minute sections a day or 2 15 minutes, maybe it's right when you wake up, right when you go to sleep. Take that time for yourself. Maybe that is while you're eating. Maybe that's when you're reading. Maybe that's when you're just laying there and not doing anything. But having those opportunities to refuel, that's another way to refuel. It's not just nutrition. It's not just the sleep. And having that time for yourself. Once again, not 100% related to nutrition, but those are two things that I've really found are helpful with such a busy schedule. Because student athletes, they're kind of rough with expectations and with what is demanded of them every single day to get accomplished.
I might be able to offer some insight too, because I'm just coming off of my college career, and I've seen both ends of the spectrum, having success, and then also having a really terrible time in college. When I ran at UAB, I ran with Rachel, and she can vouch for it. I was terrible for my freshman, sophomore, and junior year because of overtraining, stress from schoolwork, and just not being able to manage everything, and injury. But in my later years, once I found that balance of everything, it really worked for me. And the thing that really was kind of a switch for me is deciding how important is this to me, really? Like, how serious is she really about her sport? And if she decides that that's something that she really, truly loves and wants to be successful at, then it might be, all right, well, how much is she socializing outside? And I realized, looking back at my college career, I was really, really overly social freshman, sophomore year. That could have contributed to my injuries. And once I got serious, I really started prioritizing sleep and eating. And, I kind of minimized being out with other people. But, I always had my teammates to come back to. So, surrounding yourself with like-minded people, like other people who are looking to be successful, that really helped me. So, just kind of, you have to understand that if you want to be good at your sport, you can't put sleep back. Even now, I'm like in bed at 10:30, and I'm not a college athlete anymore, but it's like, I know that's when I'm going to feel good, getting my sleep. So just how much do you really want it? It really helps, and taking time for yourself too. You'll go insane, and then you'll have to take time off because of overtraining. It's a mess.
Yeah, I think instilling the importance of sleep and taking time for yourself, because psychological stress, your body doesn't know the difference between mental and physical stress. I had a coach who always said that, and it's actually one of the best takeaways from my past coaches, because it's so true. When you're under so much stress in school and all these different expectations and pressures, especially being, even a 16-year-old athlete going into college, it's a really difficult thing. And a lot of athletes they reach the collegiate level, and it is just a smack in the face because it is so hard to manage. So I think really reinforcing those good habits of, time management is one of the most important things once you get to college. But like you said, in high school, they're doing so much more now, and it's just, they're spread so thin. So I think really focusing on that and the taking time for yourself, psychologically, mental health, sleep, that really just the balance. And the balance is the hardest thing to find, but I think reinforcing that now, she'll be better off as an 18-year-old going into all of that. because obviously high school, I mean, they're preparing them just as extremely, so.
And schedules and plans work really well too.
Yeah.
I mean, student athletes, people in general, they thrive off of having a plan. And oftentimes, like, the stress and things can come from not feeling like you have zero control over what's going on. So having a plan for when you're going to eat, what you're going to eat, having a plan for, you know, your training, your mentality, your, when you're going to study for school, having those plans and letting them create them gives them a little bit of autonomy over what they're choosing to do too. And then you figure out their priorities as well.
Folks, at some point we have to end all this stuff, so I know people have places, families to get home to, probably go eat dinner, things like that. But I just wanted to thank everybody up here on the panel for giving their time and knowledge, and hopefully you guys figured out some things that you can do differently, maybe some things that you might be doing now that maybe you should not be doing, you can do differently. But before we go, there's one of probably my favorite book these days is this book called Run Fast, Eat Slow. And it's not just for runners, although that's who wrote it. We're two runners, but it's great. It's a cookbook, great recipes, a lot of them really simple, a lot of them recipes that the panel talked about while they were talking about the things you can do. So I was trying to figure out the best way to give this. I wish I had one for everybody, but they're expensive, and so we can't. Who has the closest birthday to today? Whose is in the next 2 weeks? Whose is within the next month? Seriously. You're the first hand up. So guys, thanks. I'm sure you guys have some specific questions. A few from the panel will probably be around after conclusion. And if it's sports-related questions, Michael and I can, we're not registered dietitians, but we do have a lot of general knowledge of just sports safety and things you can do for your athletes, whether you're an adult, whether you're a kid. So anyway, thanks again to Brandon, to Elizabeth, to Lauren, to Megan, to Rachel, and to Amy, and thank you guys for coming.